Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 15 of Black and Gold weekly Bruins show here on YouTube in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. And as you can see, things are a little bit different this week. Normally, I have a guest on and we talk all things Bruins, but I am by myself this week doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be still doing a review of the past week and a look ahead to the week ahead coming up for Boston. But we're going to be spending a lot of this show talking about the trade deadline targets, and potential moves that the Bruins can make. And we're going to kind of go pretty in-depth on those things here. It's just me this week, but it's still going to be a lot of fun and a great show. So before we get into it, I just want to thank everyone at Black and Gold Productions for their support. Obviously, this show is part of the BNG network and would not be happening without Mark and the entire team at BNG. They've been an incredible group of people to work with and been very, very supportive. So I want to give a huge thank you to them right off the bat. And I also want to point out the links down in the description. There are 3 affiliate links there. Top link is for Boston Bruins apparel. Second link is for NHL apparel, any team you want. And the third link is for NCAA, any college team you want apparel down there. They have hats, shirts, sweatshirts, sweatpants, all kinds of accessories, long sleeves, short sleeves, tons of variety in the products. And if you are in the market for any of those things, whether it's for the Bruins, whether it's for another NHL team or an NCAA college team, it would really, really be much appreciated if you would check out those links down in the description and just take a look and see if there's anything there you like, because there are some awesome products available for pretty much any team that you want. And a lot of great variety. So please check out those links in the description. But we can get right into it now. Looking at the past week for the Boston Bruins, that's how we're going to start this show off. And they had quite the week here. Started last Thursday, April 1st, with a pretty disappointing 4-1 loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins. This was another one of those games where, as a Bruins fan, I just left that game feeling frustrated. It's one of those, the Bruins can play better than what they did in that game. And that was a big game, too, against Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh is the team that is a little bit ahead of you in the standings, in the 3rd spot in the East. You are sitting in 4th. You have the Flyers and the Rangers nipping at your heels, trying to steal that last playoff spot. Every game means so much for the Boston Bruins now, and they just came out flat and got worked by the Pittsburgh Penguins on that Thursday night game last Thursday. And to me, the most frustrating thing is the fact that Pittsburgh just controlled the entire game. Like, it wasn't like Boston came out, played well, and just happened to get beat or lost it in overtime or something like that. Pittsburgh controlled that entire game, and Boston just was not ready to go, did not play well. And it was another really, really frustrating game as a Bruins fan, which unfortunately over the past 4 to 6 weeks has been something I feel like I've said on this show week after week after week, the word frustrated. And that was just another bad loss for the Bruins against the Penguins. Then they played Pittsburgh again on Saturday, April 3rd, and they came out of this one with a huge 7-5 win over the Penguins. This was mathematically, it wasn't a must-win game or anything like that, but really, this was kind of a must-win game for the Boston Bruins. They could not afford to drop both of these games to Pittsburgh, and they didn't. They came out, the offense absolutely exploded against the Penguins on Saturday. I don't know where that offense came from. We have not seen the Bruins score like that in a long, long time. They put up a 7 spot on the Pens. Pittsburgh did not go away, though. They made it interesting. It seemed like every time the Bruins tried to pull away, Pittsburgh would score another goal and just try and reel it back in a little bit. But at the end of the day, the Bruins scored plenty of goals. They ended up winning by 2, and that was a huge win on Saturday afternoon for the Boston Bruins to make sure they at least split that 2-game series with Pittsburgh, and they ended up, coming out of it same points back from Pittsburgh as they were going into it. Then they had a back-to-back set against the Philadelphia Flyers on Monday and Tuesday. The Monday game was a 3-2 loss in overtime to the Flyers, and this was just a frustrating one and a tough loss. Boston played pretty well in that game, and the Flyers, did as well. Like, that was just a good, hard-fought hockey game between two teams that played each other pretty evenly, and I think overall it was a very evenly matched game on Monday. The way that they lost, with Bergeron unfortunately catching an edge and falling down in overtime, which gave Travis Sanheim a breakaway in all alone, and he obviously put it in the net, and Philadelphia won 3-2 in overtime. Boston did get a point out of it, though, which those loser points are going to come up big at the end of the season. They make a big difference in the final standing. So at least getting a point out of that game, while it was still very disappointing to lose, they did get a point out of it, which was huge for Boston. And it was a tough loss the way that it went down in OT, but just one of those things that happens. And again, I said right after the game on Twitter, I was like, there will be no Patrice Bergeron slander on my watch. Everybody falls down. Things like that just happen sometimes. And that's just the way it went. That was the way it went for the Bruins. They came out, they played a fairly decent game. They just couldn't get it done in OT at the end. And very unfortunate with Bergeron falling down there and just basically handing the Flyers the game-winning goal. But those things happen, and I think the mark of a good team is when a team can bounce back from those kinds of things happening and come out and not letting it affect them, and making sure they come back with an even bigger and better effort the next game. And that is exactly what the Boston Bruins did on Tuesday. They came out. Jeremy Swayman was getting his first career NHL start. I want to give a huge shout out to Jeremy Swayman and a huge congratulations on making it to the NHL and getting his first career start. And in his first career NHL game, he gets his first career NHL win. It's a 4-2 Bruins win over the Flyers. This was a big one in Philadelphia. And Bergeron came back with a vengeance on a personal level as well. And I think this is one of the things that makes Patrice Bergeron such a great leader, such a great captain. And honestly, he's my all-time favorite player in the NHL. Someone my age, I'm 24 years old. So, I was still when Bergeron first came into the Bruins in 2003, 2004, I was still, very, very young. And I basically have grown up with Patrice Bergeron being the main one of the main cogs of the Boston Bruins. He spent his entire career here. I was like seven years old or so when he got drafted by the Bruins. I'm now 24, and Bergeron is still a Boston Bruin and still captain of the Boston Bruins. And or now captain of the Boston Bruins, and he's like the guy that I grew up with, and he's my favorite Bruin. He's my favorite player in the NHL, and he came out and showed why Patrice Bergeron is Patrice Bergeron in this Tuesday night game. Scores a hat trick. So going back to the Monday game, he's obviously the guy that falls down in overtime, that gives the goal to the Flyers, that lets Sanheim walk right in and end it. He comes back, and not only as a team do the Bruins respond to that, but Patrice Bergeron as an individual responds to that by scoring a hat trick, dominating the game for the Bruins, and making sure that the Boston Bruins walk out of that Tuesday night game with 2 points, which they desperately needed to keep Philadelphia behind them in the standings and to keep up with Pittsburgh as well. So Bergeron scores a hat trick. Swayman plays absolutely incredible, making 40 saves in his first NHL game. Boston gets out to a 2-0 lead in the first period. They give it away in the second, and Philly ties it up 2-2 heading into the third period. Honestly, I thought the Bruins were done. After they let Philadelphia get back into it and tie that game at 2, I thought Boston was done at that point. I was like, they're going to blow this one, like, in a very Boston Bruins kind of move this season. They're going to lose this one, and it's going to suck. But you know what? They didn't. They came out in the third period. They got the job done. Philadelphia barely got any shots in the third, particularly in the first half of the third period. Boston completely controlled the game. They go up 3-2. Bergeron finishes it off. They win 4-2 and pick up a huge 2 points over the Philadelphia Flyers. I am recording this episode on Thursday, so we do not know what is going to happen with tonight's game yet as of me recording. By the time that you guys see this episode on Friday, the game tonight against the Washington Capitals will have happened. So that's why I have the question marks there. Because right now, we don't know how the game against Washington is going to go, but by the time you guys see this episode, we will know what happens here tonight against the Capitals. But this is a big game for the Bruins against the Washington Capitals. We look at the past 4 games for Boston. They got a loss against Pittsburgh in regulation, then they beat Pittsburgh, then they lost to Philly in overtime, then they beat Philly. So they are 2-1-1 in their last 4 games. They've picked up 5 out of possible 8 points. And they are now just 4 points behind the Pittsburgh Penguins for third place in the East with 3 games in hand. And those 3 games in hand could end up being huge. They also have a now 5-point cushion over the Philadelphia Flyers and the New York Rangers, who are in 5th and 6th place. So they have a 5-point cushion for a playoff spot. They're only 4 points behind Pittsburgh with 3 games in hand. Boston's actually, despite the inconsistency in the parts of the game that are still very frustrating to watch as a fan, Boston has actually played fairly well here recently, and in their last 10 games, they are 6-2-2. So that is not a bad record in the past 10. That is 14 out of a possible 20 points. You really can't complain about that if you're a Bruins fan. So the Bruins have been playing a little bit better here of recent. They've picked up a good number of points. They're holding strong in the playoff race in the East. And they have a big game against the Capitals on Thursday night. We'll see how that one goes. By the time this episode airs, we'll know what happens. But it's going to be interesting to see how tonight's game goes. This is a really big one, I think, for the Bruins. And I'm looking forward to see what they're able to do. But that is the past week for the Bruins here. Obviously, despite the frustration and despite the inconsistencies, they're picking up points. They're actually doing a pretty good job. And 2-1-1, can't really complain about that or if you're a Bruins fan, particularly against important opponents like the Penguins and the Flyers. So that's going to do it for this segment. We are now going to head into some trade deadline talk and look at what the Boston Bruins could possibly do at the trade deadline and who some of their potential targets could be. So now we are going to do some trade deadline talk here. Looking ahead, the NHL trade deadline is coming up on Monday, April 12th. And Boston is definitely going to be a team that is heavily talked about from now leading up till the deadline. And possibly making some significant moves here as they gear up for a playoff run. Now, again, I want to remind everyone, I am recording this on Thursday, so there is a chance that something could happen between me recording this and when it actually comes out on Friday. But we don't know. Maybe the Bruins wait till the weekend. Maybe they wait till deadline day itself. We don't know. Maybe they don't do anything at all. But I just want to remind everyone that, don't rip me in the comments if the Bruins make a trade and then I'm talking about it like it hasn't happened yet. That's because as of me recording this, it hasn't happened yet. So, Part of Black and Gold Productions is the awesome website blackandgoldhockey.com, where we have an amazing team of writers putting out Bruins content each and every day. And one of our awesome writers, Joey, did a trade deadline preview for the Boston Bruins, and I'm basically going to go through and look at some of the trade targets that he has mentioned in the article and talk about whether I would like the Bruins to go after them. if a deal like that is realistic or what is likely to happen, and just kind of give my perspective on some of the trade targets that he has listed in this article. So let's take a look here. This is at blackandgoldhockey.com, and it's a Boston Bruins trade deadline preview by one of our writers, Joey Partridge, and you guys can check this article out yourselves at blackandgoldhockey.com. That'd be awesome. Give it some views and take a look and comment what you think the Bruins should be doing here at the deadline. But as we're going to go through here, we're going to talk about some guys that he has listed as potential trade targets for Boston. Now, obviously, the top guy listed here is Kyle Palmieri. This is not going to happen. This article was written before the Kyle Palmieri trade, which happened on Wednesday night. I've talked about that trade on my other channel, Off the Wall Hockey. Palmieri is off the board. Now, I will say this. Kyle Palmieri was one of the guys that I thought the Bruins should be looking at. I'm a big fan of his. He's a very consistent player. He has a great attitude. He's a veteran guy, very good in the locker room. And he's been a very strong goal scorer for a long time now in the NHL. I'm not big on the Bruins going for rentals this year, and I'll talk more about that after we go through this article as to why I really don't want the Bruins to make any rental moves. But if the Bruins were going to go for a rental, Kyle Palmieri was the rental piece that I wanted. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. But I think that he would have been a really, really good fit in Boston. Unfortunately, the Islanders got to him first, got the deal done with New Jersey, and Kyle Palmieri is now a New York Islander. Next up, Mattias Ekholm and Philip Forsberg. So these are two guys that I've talked about on this show over the past few weeks, two guys that have gotten a lot of talk as far as the Boston Bruins potentially trading for have been as far as that's concerned, with the Bruins possibly trading for them. This I don't think is going to happen now. And I know that Joey in the article here says this one is a pipe dream for Bruins fans because of the potential return that Nashville would have to get for these two guys. There's been another wrench thrown in this potential trade as well. The Nashville Predators are in a playoff spot. You know, it was funny, 3-4 weeks ago, we were talking about Nashville as potentially being one of the biggest sellers at the deadline, potentially blowing that team up, potentially making some serious moves, like trading away guys like Mattias Ekholm and Philip Forsberg, maybe even Victor Arvidsson, maybe even Ryan Ellis. Nashville was supposed to be a team cleaning house at the deadline. And then they went on a win streak. They won 6 in a row. They pulled into a playoff spot. They're 8-2-0 in their last 10 games. The Nashville Predators, I do not think, are going to be big sellers at the deadline anymore. Maybe they drop one guy. Maybe they sign one guy out. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Nashville doesn't sell it all now. They have a legitimate shot, and I think are actually likely now to make the playoffs. With the Blackhawks falling off, with the Blue Jackets being a disappointment, with Dallas being a disappointment, that 4th spot is Nashville's for the taking, and they are in it right now. I don't think the Predators are going to be getting rid of these guys. I really don't. I think that they make the playoffs, and I think that they're going to take the team that they have into the playoffs and see if they can make any noise. Maybe Ekholm possibly still gets moved. Forsberg's not going anywhere. I would be shocked if Nashville would move Forsberg now. Arvidsson, I don't think, is going anywhere. Ellis certainly isn't going anywhere. Ekholm may be the guy that they still potentially move because he is a UFA after next season. But honestly, I would not at all be surprised if Nashville doesn't move anybody. I don't expect them to switch gears and be buyers or anything like that. I don't think they're going to go out and try and land a big fish or buy at the deadline. But I would not be surprised if they are off the sellers list now because they're in a playoff spot. And there's really no reason for them to give up on this season and just sell at the deadline when they're probably going to make the playoffs this year. So the whole situation surrounding the Nashville Predators has changed drastically over the past month. And I don't think Ekholm or Forsberg are going to be guys that are coming to Boston at this point. And, you know, Joey talks about the potential return that would get and the Bruins not having enough to send back to Nashville. I agree with that as well. I think this was a pipe dream from the start for the Bruins, but now with Nashville in a playoff situation, I think this could be a pipe dream for any team, because I don't think Nashville is going to be selling the way that we thought they were 3 weeks ago at the deadline this season. Next guy on the list, and this was another guy that I really wanted the Boston Bruins to be in on, and that is Connor Garland from the Arizona Coyotes. I would love to see Connor Garland in a Boston Bruins uniform. The only problem with this is the same issue that we have with the Nashville Predators guys potentially coming to Boston. The Arizona Coyotes are in a playoff spot now. This is another team that 3-4 weeks ago we thought was going to be one of the big sellers at the trade deadline. And now they have pulled into 4th spot in the West. They're in the playoffs as of right now. St. Louis has fallen off a cliff. LA also has not been playing all that well recently, and Arizona has jumped those teams into the 4th playoff spot in the West Division. So now that begs the question, are the Arizona Coyotes going to give up guys and sell at the deadline like we thought they were going to 3 weeks ago? Probably not. I still think some of their pending UFAs potentially could get moved. But Garland's an RFA at the end of this season, and he's a guy that's one of Arizona's best goal scorers. He's a 20-plus goal guy every single year, a legitimate second-line player, and he's one of Arizona's best offensive players. So if you're the Arizona Coyotes and you are in the midst of a playoff race right now, trying to make the postseason, and potentially, as of right now, being in position to go to the playoffs, why would you sell off one of your best players? It really, again, I feel like that's unlikely now at this point, and that's really changing things heading into this deadline. Is a lot of these teams that we thought were going to be big time sellers probably aren't now. Nashville and Arizona being the big two. These were teams we thought we were going to be unloading at the deadline, and players were going to be on the block and available for teams looking to buy. And now with them in playoff position and in the midst of playoff races, I feel like it's unlikely that they sell the way that a lot of us thought they were a month ago. So that's really kind of thrown a wrench into the deadline this year, is who are the sellers? And are there really that many sellers? I don't think Nashville and Arizona are going to be selling anymore the way that we thought they were. And as much as I would love to see Connor Garland in a Bruins uniform, I feel like this deal is less likely now because of the Coyotes' playoff race and the situation that they're in the standings now. The only thing that I can think of here is if it was kind of some sort of swap involving Jake DeBrusk that would send DeBrusk to Arizona and Garland to Boston. Now, Garland's a much better player at the NHL level right now than Jake DeBrusk is, so Boston would have to give something else up as well. But at least in that situation, Arizona would be getting a player back in return so that they could, at least put DeBrusk into their lineup. And it wouldn't be like they were just giving away Garland for a draft pick or something like that, where they wouldn't get anything back. So that potentially maybe could still happen. But I don't think Arizona is just going to give up Garland without getting an NHL piece in return right now because of the playoff race that they're in. So that would complicate this trade a little bit. But again, I am all aboard the Boston Bruins adding a piece like Connor Garland, and I would absolutely give up Jake DeBrusk to do it, without a doubt. Connor Garland is a significantly more productive player than Jake DeBrusk at this point, and that would make the Boston Bruins a better team. So I would love to see the Bruins get Connor Garland from Arizona. Again, because of Arizona being in a playoff spot, I don't know how willing they're going to be to trade Garland at the deadline this year, but if he is out there, I would love to see the Bruins go and get him. Now, a guy that I do not want to see the Bruins go and get next on this list is Taylor Hall. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I could talk about this all day. Taylor Hall is one of the most overrated players in the NHL, in my opinion. He's also not a goal scorer. If you look at his finishing analytics, they are not good. He is not a goal scorer. Taylor Hall is a playmaking winger. That is not what the Boston Bruins need. They have playmakers. They have guys that can pass the puck. They need somebody other than David Pastrnak on the wing and Brad Marchand that can put the puck in the net. They need a goal scorer, and Taylor Hall is not a goal scorer. He is a playmaker. He's a puck possession, drive play, pass it off kind of winger, and he is not a goal scorer, and that is not what the Boston Bruins need. They need a goal scorer. They need a Kyle Palmieri, which obviously they can't get now. They need a Connor Garland. They need somebody with some finishing ability. That is not Taylor Hall. This is not what the Bruins need. On top of that, Taylor Hall is just not a winner. He is flat out not a winner. What have teams done in the playoffs with Taylor Hall on them? Nothing. How often has Taylor Hall even gone to the playoffs? Not very often. This guy is not the roster-changing, franchise-changing player that people seem to think he is. He just isn't. With the exception of his one MVP season in New Jersey, which is the complete outlier of the rest of his career, he has not been a guy that single-handedly changes a team. And so many people, when he went to Buffalo this offseason, thought that the addition of Taylor Hall was going to drastically change the Buffalo Sabres. It didn't at all. In fact, they're worse this year than they were last year. Now, the injury to Jack Eichel has a lot to do with that, but even with Jack Eichel healthy early in the season, the Sabres were not any better with Taylor Hall than they were without him last year. And the Sabres now this year are the worst team in the league. Hall only has 2 goals. Like, this guy is not the guy to give a lot up for. I don't want Taylor Hall on the Boston Bruins, especially as a rental. I just don't. He's not a winner. He's not a goal scorer. He's not the kind of player that the Bruins need. This is a straight up no from me. I do not want the Bruins going after Taylor Hall. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of talk about Boston being heavily involved in discussions for Taylor Hall. I do not want Don Sweeney to do this. This will be a mistake. This will be a mistake for the Boston Bruins if they make a deal like this. I do not want Hall here. Just too many reasons for him not to work out here, as opposed to the chances of him actually working out here. Again, I think he's massively overrated. He's not a franchise-changing player. He never has been. Outside of that one MVP season, that's really the only year where he was really a game changer in the lineup. Other than that, New Jersey stunk for most of the seasons that he was there. The Oilers stunk when he was in Edmonton. The Arizona Coyotes did not get any better when Taylor Hall went there in December of last year, and they ended up getting thrashed by Colorado in the playoffs last year. Like, Taylor Hall doesn't drastically change your team. Buffalo did not get any better when they added Taylor Hall this offseason. He's a complimentary player. He's a top 6 guy who does bring some good ability and good talent level to the team, but he's not a winner. He's not a goal scorer, what is what the Bruins need, and I just do not want to see the Boston Bruins go in on Taylor Hall. That's just my opinion. I have never been a big Hall fan, and I think it would be a mistake for the Bruins to make that move. Next on the list is a very interesting option here, Rickard Rakell from the Anaheim Ducks. So, Boston and Anaheim obviously have a rapport now after last trade deadline where they picked up Ritchie and Ondrej Kase from Anaheim. Ritchie's played really, really well this season after struggling in his first return last year with the Bruins. Ondrej Kase, unfortunately, concussions are putting an end to any hopes of him being an impact player. But again, that's not really Boston's fault. They went for it. They went out, they tried to bring in somebody who can score, and unfortunately the injuries are taking a toll on that. But there's a rapport there between the Ducks and the Bruins. Rickard Rakell's a really interesting piece. This is a guy that has had some great NHL seasons and does have a lot of talent. He was very, very good when he first came into the league. His numbers over the past few seasons, unfortunately, though, have declined. And I am worried about that decline. I think people might be overvaluing what Rickard Rakell is now because of how good he was his first few years in Anaheim. Now, the caveat to that, the thing to think about is the fact that when Rickard Rakell came into the NHL, the Anaheim Ducks were still a very, very good team. They were a contending team, one of the best in the West, and they had a great roster from top to bottom, and Rakell fit in very well there, scored a lot of goals, and put up really good offensive numbers. Over the past few seasons, the Anaheim Ducks have declined into a rebuild. They've gotten older, they've gotten sold off some pieces, and they're a rebuilding team now. And as the team has gotten worse, Rickard Rakell's production has gone down. Now, that's not surprising. That's generally what happens. As a team gets worse, the players don't put up as good of numbers. So maybe if Rickard Rakell gets out of Anaheim and goes to a good team, he'll get back to being the player that he was early in his career with the Anaheim Ducks. That is very well possible, and maybe the change of scenery is what Rakell needs to get back to being the player that he was. But still, even with that possibility, the decline in play and production over the past couple of years does concern me with Rickard Rakell. He's not getting any younger. He's in his late 20s now. And I haven't seen the same kind of player as I did in his first few years with the Ducks. Now, saying that, again, there is a possibility that if you put some better players around him, that he could get back to being that guy. And I think that's an important thing. If you put some, he might be a guy that needs talent around him. He may not necessarily be the single-handed game changer himself and drive play himself. But if you put a good team around him, he might be able to be really productive again. And obviously, coming to a team like Boston and playing in your top six, probably with David Krejci, that's putting good players around him and the chance for him to possibly be productive again. So I am not completely out on Rickard Rakell. This is a trade that I would at least think about if I'm the Boston Bruins. But my big thing about Rakell would be to not overpay for him. And from what I'm hearing from around the league right now is that the asking price for Rickard Rakell is very, very high. And if I'm the Bruins, I do not want to overpay. However, if a reasonable deal can be done, Rickard Rakell is a guy that I would not mind seeing in a Boston Bruins uniform. And I would think about it if I'm Don Sweeney, at least. And because again, if you put him with David Krejci or if you put him with Patrice Bergeron and you have good players around him, I think he can be productive again. And he's still under 30, so it's not like you're bringing in a 30 plus guy. He does still have some juice left in those legs and can be a good player at the NHL level still for sure. So Rakell is definitely one that I would think about. And that brings us to the end of this article here. So I've talked about all of these guys. Connor Garland is definitely a guy I would love to see in a Bruins uniform. Rickard Rakell would be a really nice pickup potentially if the price is right. And if the Bruins aren't able to get Garland, Rakell would be a guy that I would think about. Taylor Hall, I want nothing to do with. Ekholm and Forsberg, I just don't think are going to happen because the Predators are probably going to the playoffs. And Kyle Palmieri is a guy that obviously I would have loved to have seen in Boston, but not going to happen because he's been traded to the Islanders. So that's it for this article. Another guy that has come up in trade talks that I want to talk about is this guy here from the LA Kings, Alex Iafallo. Now, he would be a rental piece. His contract is up at the end of the season, but he's 27 years old. He's a left winger, left shot, and he's actually having a pretty solid season with the LA Kings, who are not a highly offensive team. The Kings do not score a lot of goals, but he has 9 goals and 23 points in 37 games for the Kings this year. And if you look at what he did last season with LA, he scored 17 goals and 43 points in 70 games on a team that was not very good offensively. So this is a guy that can put up numbers. He can score. And again, I think his numbers would really benefit from playing on a with good players around him. And he's a guy that can give you 40 plus points in a season. He's a legit second liner. And this is interesting that now with Palmieri off the market, Iafallo is a name that's come up with regards to the Bruins and them possibly getting him. And I think this would be a lower cost option that I definitely would at least inquire about. Again, another guy that I really wouldn't give up too much for, and he's a rental piece, and as I'm going to talk about in a minute, I'm not big on the Bruins going for rentals this year, but it's an option, and I think it's a player that I think could possibly make the Bruins a little bit better in their middle six, and could be a decent secondary scorer added to this lineup, which is really what the Boston Bruins need. So, Iafallo is an interesting option here. Another guy, and I don't even want to talk about this, but WEEI had an article out about this the other day, and I am absolutely saying no to Mike Hoffman from the St. Louis Blues coming to the Boston Bruins. There was, when Hoffman was a free agent this offseason, there was talk about the Bruins possibly signing him. He ended up signing with the Blues. Now the Blues are really struggling this season. Hoffman's been getting healthy scratched. And now there's talk about him getting traded at the deadline here, and Boston being potentially a team that could be on Mike Hoffman. Absolutely not. Believe me, Bruins fans, you want nothing to do with Mike Hoffman. I am getting angry just thinking about it. This guy is getting healthy scratched by the St. Louis Blues because he's so bad. He's one of the laziest players in the NHL. He makes no effort to play defense. He makes no effort to win board battles. He is a completely one-dimensional player concerned about one thing, and that is scoring goals, and he does nothing else. And he makes no effort to do anything else. He's a very low-effort player. He is lazy as all hell, one of the laziest players in the league, completely one-dimensional, and he is not a winner. He is not a winner. The Florida Panthers are significantly better this year without him. The St. Louis Blues are significantly worse this year with him. And whatever team, if a team trades for Mike Hoffman, they are going to get worse with Mike Hoffman in their lineup. He makes the Boston Bruins worse, not better. So I am completely out on Mike Hoffman. No thank you. That is not a deal that I want the Bruins to even discuss. All out on Mike Hoffman. Do not want him in this locker room. He's a locker room issue at times as well. Very low effort player. Not what the Boston Bruins need. The exact opposite of what the Boston Bruins need. So anybody who brings up Mike Hoffman as a possibility, just please say no to it, because that would be a terrible move for the Boston Bruins. But Iafallo, not completely against. But anyway, we talked about a bunch of guys in this episode and possible trade targets for the Bruins. I've said a couple of times already that I am out on rentals this year, and I want to tell you why. I do not think that the Bruins should be giving up assets, draft picks, or young players, or prospects, or whatever, for a one-year rental guy for this season, because I don't think it really is going to matter what the Bruins do at the deadline. They are not a Stanley Cup team this year. I have not seen anything from the Boston Bruins this season that makes me think that they are a legitimate Stanley Cup winning team this year. I just think, as someone who watches a lot of hockey, not the Boston Bruins, from around the league, and watches a lot of these other teams, there are a lot of teams who are significantly better than the Bruins this year, not just around the league, but in their own division. The New York Islanders and the Washington Capitals are both significantly better than the Boston Bruins right now. That's just a fact. And the Bruins might be able to steal a playoff series against one of them, but not against both. So I don't even think Boston is going to come out of the East in the playoffs and make the Final Four. Even if they add a big piece at the deadline, I still don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're good enough to win the Stanley Cup this year. So if you're not good enough to win the Stanley Cup, why would you give up future assets for a one-year rental in a year where you're not going to win the Stanley Cup. That's just not a smart thing to do, in my opinion. And what I always go back to is the Rick Nash trade. Now, I was not against the Rick Nash trade when it happened because I thought that the 2018 Bruins team could potentially win the Cup if they got by Tampa Bay and could be a team that made a run. So that made the Rick Nash trade worth it. But the Boston Bruins gave up a lot to get Rick Nash, and they still ended up losing in the second round to Tampa Bay. And looking back on that trade, it really wasn't worth it. And Nash ended up retiring, didn't even play the next season because of concussions and because of injuries. So I'm looking at the Bruins team this year, and I don't want them to go out and pay for a rental in a year where they're not going to win the Stanley Cup. The Boston Bruins should be gearing up for next season and making one last run with this Bergeron, Marchand, Rask, Krejci core next season. If some of those guys are even back next season, they should be gearing up for next year because I don't think it really matters what they do at the deadline this year. I don't see them winning the Cup. I just don't. I think there are better teams in the league that have a much, much higher chance. The Avalanche, the Golden Knights, the Lightning, the Hurricanes, the Panthers, the Islanders, the Capitals. I could go around the league and name off teams that I think have a significantly better shot at the Stanley Cup this year than the Boston Bruins do. And I just don't think it makes sense to bring in rental players when you're really unlikely that you're going to go deep into the playoffs. So I want guys that have term on their contract for next season, or a guy that is going to be cheap enough, like potentially an Iafallo, who you could possibly re-sign in the offseason with all this cap space that you're going to have. So if it may be a rental right now, but I want him signed for next year if you're going to bother to trade for him. If you're not going to bother signing him for next year or beyond, then don't trade for him at the deadline this year. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. I don't want the Bruins in on rentals just because I don't think they're winning the Cup this year. And I don't think it makes any sense to grab a rental when you're probably going to be out in the first or second round of the playoffs to begin with. So that's just my opinion, but that's why I've been saying that I really don't want rentals. I'd rather get a guy with term on his contract that Boston can have for next season as well, which I think next season is really the year that they have to go for it with this core. If they're going to win again with Bergeron and Marshy and this core group, it's going to have to be next season. If not, the window, I think, will have closed at that point. So there's my trade deadline discussion. Various different targets and my overall philosophy for the Bruins heading into this trade deadline. Coming up, we're going to preview the week ahead, finish up with Bruins Bet of the week, and then that will do it here for episode 15. But coming right up now, previewing the upcoming week for Boston. They've got some big games coming up, going to be some great hockey. Okay, everybody, now it's time to take a look ahead to the Bruins' upcoming week of action. So they do play tonight, Thursday, when I'm recording this, against the Washington Capitals, but that game will have already happened by the time that you guys see this video on Friday, so there's really no point in previewing it. All I'll say is that's a big game for the Bruins. I'd love to see them get 2 points out of that one. Then on Saturday, the 10th here, they are at Philadelphia, finishing up this road trip. Obviously, they've played Philadelphia back on Monday and Tuesday earlier this week. They lost in overtime the first game, won the second game. Would really love to see them win this third game against the Flyers on Saturday. It's a 2 p.m. afternoon start. And if Boston can take 5 out of 6 points against the Flyers, I will be perfectly okay with that. Obviously, 6 out of 6 would have been great, but 5 out of 6 is nothing to complain about. I expect it to be a very hard-fought game. Philly is fighting for their playoff lives. They know that they really, really need this win badly, but the Bruins need it just as bad. The Bruins, if they're going to make the playoffs, have to win games like this, and they've played well against the Flyers this season. They need to make sure that they pick up this win. Particularly with it being the first of a back-to-back situation, which the second game is always tough, and a much tougher matchup in the second game as well, which we'll talk about in a second. So that first game, or that Saturday game against the Flyers, is going to be really, really important for the Bruins. They need to get the job done in that one, and I would really, really like to see them pick up the 2 points there and really separate themselves from the Flyers in the standings, even more than the 5 points that they are right now, and hopefully give themselves a even bigger cushion for being in the playoffs versus being out in that 5th spot. Then on Sunday, the 11th, the second game of the back-to-back this weekend, Sunday night at 7 p.m., they have the Washington Capitals back at home. I'm honestly expecting the Bruins to lose this game. This is a tough situation schedule-wise for Boston. They are at Philadelphia on Saturday for an afternoon game. Then they have to fly home back to Boston, probably Saturday night, and then play Washington, one of the best teams in the East and one of the best teams in the league, on Sunday night back on home ice after a 3-game road trip, I think it's been, that they are on. So not an easy game here for Boston against a very difficult opponent in the Capitals. First game back from a road trip, and they played the day before and had travel in between. Bruins have every excuse in the world to lose this game. I don't expect them to win this one, which is why I think the Thursday game against Washington is really, really important. They need to get at least a point out of that game, because I don't think they're going to get a point out of this Sunday game. That just schedule-wise, it's a really difficult one there for Boston. But don't worry, the schedule gets easier as they get a day off on Monday, and then Tuesday they are back on home ice against the Buffalo Sabres. This is a game that the Boston Bruins absolutely have to win. If you are in a playoff race, you cannot be dropping games to the Buffalo Sabres. This is a must-win for the Bruins. They have got to make sure that they take care of business against a team like Buffalo, who is the worst in the league this year. And This is just, I fully expect the Bruins to come out and not only win this game, but convincingly win this game against the Buffalo Sabres. They need to, because then on next Thursday, they play the New York Islanders. And Boston has not beaten the Islanders at all this season. It's a very tough matchup for them. I don't know why I wrote the 4:15 different than the other 3 dates before that. I must hit the wrong button by mistake, but ignore that. It's Thursday the 15th. They have the Isles on home ice, and it will be nice to get the Isles on home ice because Boston has played in Long Island a lot this year, and it has not gone very well. So getting them at home will be a nice change up here, but still, the Isles are a very tough matchup for the Bruins. They play Boston extremely well. Boston hasn't beaten them yet this season, and the Isles are fighting for the division lead, which Boston is not at that level right now. So the Isles are a really tough matchup, and I would be surprised if the Bruins win that game, quite honestly. So the Bruins this coming week need to make sure that they take care of business against Philadelphia and against Buffalo, because I think the Washington game is going to be very tough to win, and I think the Islanders game is going to be very tough to win. Out of these 4 games, the Bruins need to win at least 2 of them. I would say I'm probably expecting a 2-2 record in these 4 games. If they go 2-1-1, I'll be happy with it. I'll be happy with it if they go 2-1-1. Squeezing an OT point out of either that Washington game or that Islanders game, I'd be perfectly okay with that because I don't think the Bruins are likely to win those. Again, so a possible 8 points. If they can get 5 out of 8 points again this week like they did last week, I'll be pretty happy as a Bruins fan, and the Bruins will be in decent shape as far as the playoffs go and the standings are concerned. If they're able to pull 5 out of these next 8 points, I'll be happy with that. 4 out of 8 is okay. That's almost what I'm expecting. But they have to make sure that they get at least 4 points and that they beat the Flyers and the Sabres this coming week. If not, I'm going to be a very frustrated and angry Bruins fan at the end of this week if they lose one of those games to Philly or Buffalo. And I'll be really happy if they could squeeze out a win against the Islanders or the Capitals. That would just be icing on the cake for this coming week. So we'll see what the Bruins do. They've got a pretty mixed schedule here. Very winnable games, I think, against the Flyers and the Sabres, but then some very tough games as well against the Capitals and the Sabres. The Islanders. So, we'll we'll see what Boston does, but another 4 games this week to watch, and it's going to be an interesting week of Boston Bruins hockey yet again. We'll see what they're able to do. And that is now going to bring me to the final segment, Bruins Bet of the Week. Haven't done very well with this this season. I lost again last week. I thought the Bruins were going to win the first game against the Flyers. They ended up losing in overtime, so I got that bet of the week wrong. They came back the next night, of course, and won on Tuesday, but it doesn't matter. I still got it wrong. I think since I've started doing these, I've gotten 2 right and 4 wrong, I believe, since I've started doing these. So, again, not very good at this, but my Bruins bet of the week this week is Tuesday against the Buffalo Sabres, taking the Bruins puck line in that game. They need to not only win, but win convincingly in that game. So I really want to see the Bruins take it to the Sabres. It's the day after the trade deadline, so Buffalo probably won't have Taylor Hall anymore. May not have some other players anymore either. Boston has got to come out and pound the last place Sabres in that game. So Boston is definitely going to be heavy favorites. I think if you were to make a money line bet on it, it would be a very minimal return. There wouldn't be a whole lot of juice on that. So I am taking Boston puck line to win by at least 2 goals over the Buffalo Sabres on Tuesday. And there'll definitely be some more bang for your buck taking puck line as opposed to money line there, with the Bruins being heavily favored over the Sabres. So that is my Bruins bet of the week for this week. They should be able to handle the Sabres and handle them rather easily. Buffalo is not got much going for them right now. And especially post-trade deadline, I think Buffalo is going to have even more NHL regulars out of the lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Sabres roster even looks like for that game. They almost certainly won't have Taylor Hall. So that's my Bruins bet of the week. And that is going to bring us now to the end of episode 15. Obviously, things were a little bit different this week than usual. I usually have a guest on and we have a lot of conversation back and forth and stuff, but it was just me this week doing things slightly differently. Should have a guest on back for next week for episode 16. Actually, I already have one lined up, so unless something happens and that falls through, I will have a guest and things will be back to more normal next week for episode 16. But I hope you still enjoyed this one with just me, and I know we covered quite a bit of different things. Talking about the Bruins past week, talking about the trade deadline and some potential targets, and then talking about the upcoming week in Bruins Bet of the Week as well. So, again, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Huge shout out to Mark Allred and everyone at Black and Gold Productions. The show is in partnership with BNG Productions. Check out the website, blackandgoldhockey.com, an amazing team of writers putting out daily Bruins content on the website. Great podcast network as well, some awesome Bruins shows, part of the podcast network. Check out the affiliate links in the description. If you're in the market for Bruins apparel, NHL apparel, NCAA college apparel, it's all there. Great variety and selection to choose from. It would really help out a lot if you click those links and checked out what's available there. That is going to do it for episode 15, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you still had a good time, even though it was just me this week, and we will be back with a guest for next week's episode. Episode 16 coming up next Friday. So thanks again, and talk to you guys next week.